Kyle here from allmusic.blogspot.com. Random artist feature, collection, store history kind of thing. The random artist feature is a weird title, but kind of stuck with it, but I may change it. Anyway, I'm here to do Rush, being the featured artist. Part 2, maybe part 3 come later, or I might just do it all in one. I'll try to get through it all. Anyway, I left off, I believe, with Hemispheres in 1978. Of course, then in 1980, they released Permanent Waves, which, another really good album. I wouldn't say it has my favorite song, but I consider Natural Science on this album to be basically progressive rock. Almost like the kind of songs that progressive rock works on on multiple levels. It's a perfect composition. There's a few other tracks I think in that way that aren't like long epics, but are like sort of mid epics, 10, 11 minutes. One being like Heart of the Sunrise from Yes, another being The Cinema Show from Genesis. Yeah, Natural Science is 9:27. But this record, while they got was their most success commercially with a couple of the songs that were on the radio frequently, The Spirit of Radio and Free Will. And I still like those songs, but I've heard them a lot and don't prefer it to the rest of the album for various reasons. Entre Nous, actually, is another song that the radio, classic rock radio, has played, and I actually haven't worn out. I really like that song. It's just between us, It's just, what is it, how the lyrics go? For us to realize, it's kind of uplifting. It's a radio song. I mean, just like Free Will and Spirit of Radio, but it just didn't get quite as much attention. And I don't know, they played it live a couple times when I saw them, maybe once when I saw them, but I don't know if the band loves it. It's just a song that has a minor amount of popularity. So, but also this album features Different Strings, which I think the band may have played on the Permanent Waves tour in 1980, but that would be it. I don't know if they've brought that back since. And again, the Rushaholics would probably call me out on that, but I know they haven't played it very much, and it's a terrific track. It's I always think of it being acoustic, although it's not purely acoustic. But then it also features the sort of epic, 7 minutes and 50 seconds, Jacob's Ladder. And that's another piece that's rather dreamy, trippy. It sounds like something that would probably have been okay to find its way onto Hemispheres, but because it has that sort of narrative, almost science fiction element to it, isn't maybe quite as sort of based on mythology, but Jacob's Ladder, I forget what the reference is, and of course there was a movie back in the 90s with Patrick Stewart, I think it was, called Jacob's Ladder. Anyway, yeah, I really like Permanent Waves, and I think it, in some ways, is slightly underrated, because between it and the album that followed it, of course, the album that followed it, they got even more well known for it, but given the choice between the two, I would lean toward it. Natural Science especially, so then, of course, I have a copy of Moving Pictures, which they played in full, of course, back in, was it 2010, I think it was. Was it the I can't remember. Not the Clockwork Angels tour, but I'm just trying to remember the name of the tour. I should know this, but yeah, I mean, my copy is not anything exceptional, but I know it took me a while to find a used copy of this because it's their most popular record. And it has some of their staples, in being that it's Tom Sawyer's and Limelight, especially. Those two songs have been played to death. I guess between the two, I'd go with Tom Sawyer, even though that's their most well-known song. Limelight is just kind of, it's like Zeppelin's Black Dog to an extent. I mean, I don't dislike it quite that much, but this album features a number of other songs I enjoy. YYZ, people call it YYZ, I still always refer to it as YYZ, is a nice instrumental. People think Rush instrumentals, I think of YYZ. You gotta go with La Via Strangiato first, but it's still well composed, and I haven't entirely bored of it. It's got that up-tempo section in the middle that's you can't dance to it, but you can't help but just tap your foot or whatever to it. But then the other stuff on this record, I think, is, again, the deeper tracks are where the really shines or highlights. My favorite being The Camera Eye, which that was one of the earliest epics from Rush I ever liked. I remember it talks about Westminster and I don't know, the folk is sharp in the city. the synths on that track and the bass tone are just really good. It flows so well from the segues to the dynamics, sort of the emotion that's brought in. Other highlights: Red Barchetta or Barchetta, Parchetta. I guess I came to learn to pronounce it. Even though that got a minor amount of popularity, it's still, I would easily listen to that song over stuff like Limelight or Tom Sawyer right now. Another song with the great dynamics. Whatever. Then the story, the narrative, My Uncle's Farm, you know. Anyway, otherwise, Witch Hunt, which is part of the Fear trilogy, I believe, was the first song they wrote for that, is good. The lyrics are less about witches and about sort of observations on society and like social norms. But when I always think of songs about Halloween and witches, I always think of Witch Hunt. But interpret Neil Peart's lyrics how you will. But it's very dark, but it actually is very powerful at the same time. And then Vital Signs, which is a very cool track, very kind of almost synth driven and very 80s sounding. I mean, Permanent Wave sounded very 80s like, and this album did too. I think Vital Signs has that 80s tinge more than maybe most Rush songs, at least from this period in the 80s. Well, I don't want to ruin that. But anyway, so then they released, after that, that was 81, Moving Pictures. 82, I think it was, or maybe late 81. No, yeah, it was 81. The double live album, Exit Stage Left. I did not show all the Worlds of Stage, but I believe I have it, so maybe I'll have to do that in another video at some point. But this is, like, some people consider this Rush's most well-known live album and best live album. And I remember enjoying it, but I remember I was such a fanatic Rush fan back in the early 90s and mid-90s that I wanted to find the songs I loved live on. And so I think when I listen to live Rush, it's usually on bootlegs. Some of the more recent ones I've listened to, but the track list on this, The Trees and Xanadu probably among the highlights. It's got Bruin's Bane, which I believe is like a Neil feature, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, music by Leif Slices, maybe not. That's just it's an Alex feature, I guess. I know there was the Rhythm Method, which is on an album I'm going to show in a little bit. But it's got the La Via Strangiato live, and a lot of their standards from their last, from Permanent Waves, and I can't remember if the Trees on here. I'm just looking at the track list. I think it is, and that would probably be among my favorites on this live album. And Red Barchetta, Beneath, Between, Behind from Fly By Night, and Jacob's Ladder. So yeah, I mean, All the Worlds of Stage are this. All the Worlds of Stage has most of 2112. I guess the sound is a little bit better on this, but actually I'll tell you more about the next live album and how I feel it compares once I get to it. So then in '82 they released Signals, which this was kind of, by some people's standards, the last great Rush album, or even the album that Rush sort of started to not be as good to a lot of these people that wanted more of the rock guitar oriented stuff. And I have actually come to believe that this album I definitely prefer it over Moving Pictures to an extent, and I might even prefer it over Permanent Waves. It doesn't have anything quite as good as Natural Science, but do we have a track list on here? We do. And this is a pretty thick pressing that I got here, though it's not a new one, but kind of a classic cover, and then of course the backside. I actually do have the SACD or Mobile Fidelity. One of those, I found it used. I remember seeing those a lot in the 90s. It wasn't just Rush, but different bands would put out those higher fidelity CDs, and I found one for like $10. I was like, because usually they're like $30. I just snatched it up. I have it. It's in a book somewhere, but I'm not going to show it at this time. Maybe another time. But as far as Signals goes, why I probably prefer it over Moving Pictures and probably Permanent Waves, I think it's because it doesn't have any of those kind of overplayed songs. Subdivisions is probably the most well-known song on this album, and I still enjoy that song, the lyrics, and just the synth part. I'll never forget it. Even the video for it is relatable to sort of the geek or nerd culture, the outcast type of culture. But I would say the Analog Kid, awesome track, great dynamics, great sort of story. The riff on that is really fun. It's very energetic, and even that little kind of chorus, you move me with your building in your eyes, autumn woods and winter sky. It just, it's very memorable and inspiring. But otherwise, stuff like Digital Man, I love the bass line on that song. I got obsessed with that song for a short while. And then they finally brought it back live, I think in the early to mid 2000s, and then I kind of, my love for it kind of dropped a bit just because I was like, oh, this is the song that nobody ever talks about, and now people were talking about it. But Chemistry, underrated song. The Weapon's part 2 of the Fear trilogy. The Weapon I don't like quite as much as like Chemistry or some of the others, but it kind of grew on me, and part of that trilogy it works. New World Man, which is also sort of a minor radio song, I definitely still enjoy. I appreciate more than songs like Free Will or Limelight, even though it is poppy. Losing It, that's one of the other just amazing songs, and the violin arrangement and the lyrics, very inspiring. It's just melancholy. And Countdown, which is kind of underrated. They did do... No, they didn't. I thought they did it around 9/11, because they weren't really touring at that point. But I love that, the whole space shuttle explore, whatever it was, and the kind of narrative, and then the synth part is a lot like Subdivisions, but I think it still works on its own. I mean, it just in the same key, and the arrangement is similar, but it closes the album out well. I also wanted to show, before I forget, I have a couple of 45s from this period of time. I have the Spirit of Radio 7-inch right here. Rush weren't a singles band, but they did release a few singles for most records, like 1 or 2, at least when vinyl was obviously still the norm back in the 70s and 80s. But their 70s singles are not easy to find, though. I've never found it. But that's Spirit of Radio, and then New World Man, which I think the B-side, and this actually has artwork, unlike that one. The B-side is Vital Signs Live, actually, so you can see. So, yeah, as being a Rushaholic and just a lifer, it's cool to have some of the, like, I try to get as many of the, deeper releases and anything extra that I can, as long as it's not terribly expensive. And I think I probably paid about $1 for this, so. Alright, and then I have a few others. Let's just make sure I'm in the right... Yeah, okay, so I have... That's the 7-inch, and I have the 12-inch also from New World Man, which has the Vital Signs Live. And look at it, it's a clear vinyl, too, actually. So, kind of a neat deal. I don't remember how much I paid for this either. This was a promo, I guess, for radio stations, maybe? So... Oh, man, I don't want to ruin that, so I think I'm going to hold off. If I can get this in here really quickly. There we go. Alright. So then, of course, Grace Under Pressure came out in '84, after they put out, and, this was probably even less received by a lot of fans. Again, I wasn't around then. I didn't become a Rush fan until the early 90s, but by a lot of fans, they think this is the album they just kind of stopped. There were 2 80s, something too synth-driven, too much keyboards, but again, another record which really, I didn't say it already in this video. The 80s Rush, I actually think I like as much as the 70s Rush. In some ways more. It's more consistent, there's more music, of course. But this album is very consistent. Distant Early Warning, great track, not overplayed. After Image, very emotional, the guitar solo. I guess Alex Lifeson was in tears when he wrote it and performed it in the studio. Red Sector A, probably the biggest minor hit on this record, but rocking in concert. Although the lyrics are sort of about the Holocaust, like some experience of like some, not Holocaust survivors, but people who escaped like a, I should know this. They escaped from one of the concentration camps, I believe. Referring to World War II. The Enemy Within, probably the weakest song on here. Well, and that's part 3 of the Fear trilogy, I believe. I like that song, but not as much as those first 3 tracks. But I still like it. Body Electric on side 2, great sort of technology and talking about like a robot, But again, a 1-0-0, talking about ones and zeros. Kid Gloves, terrific track. The acoustic guitar part, and underrated. And I don't know if they even played that on the Grace Under Pressure tour. They might have, but that would have been the only time they ever played it. Unfortunately, never brought it back. And it's a loved song by a lot of fans. Red Lenses, I'm kind of lukewarm on, and my memory is a little odd. I mean, I would recognize if I heard it, but I can't think of it at the moment. So I guess between that and the Enemy Within, I mean, joint least favorites. And then Between the Wheels is awesome. And they did that live recently in the last decade, and again, like Digital Man, it didn't lose its luster to me, but in a sense it feels like my favorite track became other people's favorite tracks. But I love that the vocal melodies and sort of the way it ends is, I mean, I don't know if I have the lyrics on here. I have to double check. No, this didn't come with the jacket, didn't include the lyrics. Oh yeah, it did. So he says, what does he say? The one line is really good. It's like we can go from boom to bust, from dreams to a bowl of dust. We can fall from rockets' red glare down to the brother can you spare. Another war, another wasteland, another lost gem. The music on that just goosebumps. Very much a goosebump part. So I think I'm gonna stop now because these videos tend to get kind of long. See, this doesn't relate. Oh, I do. I'll show this last piece, and I think this is it. So I have the Between the Wheels. This is the Distant Early Warning 12-inch single. Yeah, I got this for $3 at Half Price Books. Unfortunately, no artwork, but for $3, it's kind of cool to have, you know, another Rush-related piece that isn't exactly easy to find. But yeah, so I mean, my Rush single doesn't really quite rival my Marillion singles collection, but I have 5 or 6 or 7 of them, you know, because they do show up once in a while. But anyway, see you in part 3.